We do a set of shows every year on this podcast. Some of them are a little bit more exciting than others. Some of them I think people look forward to, but we've done this show each of the last 3 seasons. The end of Super Bowl week, the Friday after the Super Bowl, we always spend a little bit of time asking some of the biggest questions that are looming over the NFL offseason, which we are currently in and starts in earnest next week. And that is what we are going to do today. We have about, 10, 12 questions that are at front of mind here as we dig into the offseason. It was fun to see what you guys came back with. Obviously, there are some big ones that are around quarterbacks and how quarterbacks are going to move. And then Dave is just picking out defensive tackles from contenders that he's excited about potentially watching next year.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you keyed on that one specifically because I was pretty proud of it.
Derrik also has some wonderful ones that are the most Derrik thing possible. I always love this when I give you guys just a very generic prompt where it's they're just questions about the offseason. You come back with whatever you're interested in. It's such a telling exercise, what the answers always are. They say so much about each of you.
One or two of mine are a little bit selfish and indulgent. But again, if you leave it open-ended, I'm going to do that a little bit.
All right, let's dig into these and let's start with one of Dave's that I think actually kind of brings us to a larger conversation that probably needs to happen. Dave, you wanted to know what the Vikings are going to do at quarterback this offseason. And I think we could just use that as a larger jumping off point for what the quarterback carousel was going to look like, because the Vikings are a stand-in for a lot of these other teams that are going to be seeking out a quarterback at some sort of price this spring.
You're right, and we should talk about a variety of teams. I singled out the Vikings because I find them the most interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The Dolphins are clearly in some stage of a rebuild. I would expect that they're going to cut Tua and all of the ramifications that come along with that. I don't expect the Dolphins to be ready to jump into the mix this year. You could say something similar about the Cardinals and what they decide to do with Kyler Murray. The Vikings are interesting for the same reason the Vikings have been interesting. They're a quarterback away from really, really mattering in the league landscape. It went wrong last year, but hope springs eternal. And what can you do to try to climb back into the mix? Obviously, J.J. McCarthy is going to be a piece of that. I don't expect them to give up on him, but you cannot go into 2026 obviously leaning on him the way that you did in 2025. So is that trading for a veteran? Is that finding a cast-off, somebody that gets cut from their current team? However you want to do it, I just think it's the most interesting one because I think the Vikings have the highest ceiling of any team without a settled quarterback, which sounds really familiar, but that doesn't make it less true.
And it's we have proof of concept of what the ceiling is. They literally did it with the guy who just won the Super Bowl. And I know the 2024 Vikings season ended the way that it did and Sam Darnold kind of spiraled, but and the Vikings defense isn't obviously quite as good as the Seahawks, but if they had Sam Darnold this year and he played of the same quality, you could convince me that the Vikings could have gotten to the Super Bowl. And so we know the ceiling for this roster and this team, but I just they're not. I don't think they're going to be able to be the Kyler Murray team. I don't think they're going to be able to get any of these other big ticket markets. They're going to end up in a spot where they do need to dip into what was initially the Sam Darnold market, probably the what Daniel Jones's market was going into last year. That sort of quarterback is probably what they're going to have to do. But I will say, I don't really think the J.J. McCarthy of it all is that interesting. To me, it feels like you kind of have to move on, in my opinion. I would be trying to get away from this as quickly as possible.
So I can understand that specifically when we're talking about the Vikings and their timeline. The idea that after 10 starts, how many starts have we seen from J.J. McCarthy?
Well, because he's hurt all the time.
Well, that's part of the conversation. I just think that look at some of the look at Sam Darnold.
It is 10 for the record. It's exactly 10 starts.
So I want to be clear about this. I'm going to take this in stages. I do not have a lot of faith in J.J. McCarthy based on what we have seen so far. I also am willing to acknowledge that giving up on J.J. McCarthy after 10 games, just as an idea, is crazy. But there is a third stage of this. If you're the Vikings, you can't waste another season. Even if there is a chance that he rehabs himself and he becomes a capable quarterback somewhere down the line, if you're Minnesota and you're Kevin O'Connell, you can live with that. Like, you have to make sure that you're getting something out of the 2026 season, even if that means you move on from JJ McCarthy and he has a resurgence somewhere else in 2 years. Like, I think all of those things, those three things together can be true.
Well, and so that's what I mean. That's why, to me, it's not very interesting. Like, if they were the Panthers, right? Like, they would be afforded a year or two to, like, okay, we can keep playing out the string here, see how this goes. Maybe he gets a little bit better. Maybe he finally stays healthier. Like, the Viking, we said this going into last year, and it was true. They just do not have the time to sit here and wait around with this roster, especially with how old and expensive the defense is.
I'm wondering how old the defense stays, though. Like, I wonder how many of those guys are still around. Like, I bet Hargrave gets cut this year. I don't know what they do with Jonathan Allen because they need to save some money. I mean, right now they're $40 million over the cap, which affects the type of quarterback they can get before they start doing some maneuvering around. And by the way, they don't have a general manager as they figure out how to do all of this maneuvering. Their cap guy is now running the front office. And so I'm assuming they'll be able to pull all the levers they would have otherwise. But it's a very interesting offseason for the Vikings, which, teasing this, they will be one of our most interesting teams of the offseason when we get to the combine in 2 weeks.
It's also just funny. Like, I guess I agree with you, Derrik, that if there was a way to definitively move on from JJ McCarthy, I'd be with you. But who is it? Who is that guy that is definitively like, yep, this guy's taken over and we can just forget about JJ? Like, the free agent market just doesn't do a whole lot for me. I mean, do you want to hop back on the Aaron Rodgers thing? That was a storyline with the Vikings for a couple of months there.
I'll hop back on the Geno Smith thing. That's an 11-win team with Geno Smith.
Okay, I think I agree with you, but after what we just saw from Geno and Geno's age, how can you just bring in Geno and be like, it's your show, buddy?
If he's throwing to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and has that offensive line, which I don't think is like a special offensive line, but is leaps and bounds better than what he was stuck behind in Las Vegas last year. Like, again, I don't know if it's going to be like superstar, like maybe even as good as peak in Seattle or whatever, but like it, to me, is going to be a tier or two above what JJ McCarthy was giving you.
I think Geno is one of the best case scenarios for the Vikings this year, but even
who are the other ones? Like, so just peep behind the curtain. Alec Lewis, who covers the Vikings for us, sent me a text at the beginning of this week, and he listed off like 8 quarterback options. And he's like, choose your fighter. Who would you want? And I won't tell you what my response was, but it was essentially all the quarterbacks who can be available, including like some interesting creative ones like Tanner McKee. So Dave, if you're looking at the options, you think Geno's one of the best ones. Who would you stack up in that top tier or like right alongside Geno if you're Minnesota?
Find a way to get Kyler Murray.
I don't think it'd be that hard to get Kyler Murray.
Okay, I didn't say it was impossible, just whatever. Like if you can get a reasonable price for him, yeah, those are the two that would probably get me the most juiced, are Geno Smith and Kyler Murray.
My stance on this is it worth going really cheap because of how expensive the rest of your roster is? And it also means if you go really cheap, it doesn't have to be a permanent solution, right? Like you can just make sure that you have a stopgap for this year and then kind of reassess where things are in 2027 when you're in a different spot financially, all of that. Maybe that's just, you're duct taping a problem that needs a real that really needs solving. But that's kind of where my mind went. It's like, can this team just trade for Mac Jones, tread water for a year, and then reassess? Because there really is no overwhelmingly good option. I'm not sure Kyler is that for this team. And maybe I'm too down on Kyler when it comes to him compared to the other available quarterbacks that are going to be there for the next 2 off seasons. But my mind immediately went to, how can we just fix this in the short term, kind of gesture at the idea that this is actually just competition for JJ, knowing this guy's probably going to win the job. Like I didn't, solving this with a sledgehammer was not the first place my mind went. I think that's what Kyler is.
See, I don't think I agree, just because at this point, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. I guess Kyler has 3 years left on his deal. You could, and I'd have to take a closer look at the finances, but like if you can get out of the Kyler deal in 2 years without it completely ruining things for you, and I understand
you just
said it. Yeah, exactly.
He has no guaranteed salary left after this year. He has like a couple big roster bonuses, and if you were to trade for him, he has a big roster bonus this year. I assume they'd convert it to a signing bonus, all that other stuff. But there's not a ton of money like lingering on the Kyler deal beyond this season.
If Kyler is a fairly expensive 2-year rental, and like that is the interesting thing. Like, what would Kyler fetch in a trade right now between his deal and the injury history and the way that he's played? Like, I certainly wouldn't sell the farm to get Kyler Murray, but that's like you just said, I don't think it would be that expensive. So if I could get him without mortgaging too much of my future, knowing that if it doesn't work out, we can get out of this in 2 seasons. And if it does work out, then Kyler could be the latest success story of cast off quarterbacks and we rework his deal. I don't think it's that like it is a big swing because it's a big name and you would be trading for him, but I don't think it's as big as it sounds, you know?
I have 2 questions for you, Derrik. One,
Yes.
what would you pay for Kyler Murray in a trade?
Probably not a first-round pick.
My thought
Probably
is
not a first-round
Geno
pick.
went for a 3 last year.
I think you have to pay more than that because he's younger.
That's
and,
my thought
and he's
as
more
well.
talented.
So,
So
like,
probably at least
a
a 2
second.
and like change.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of where my mind goes.
And
maybe even a 2 in back-to-back years or something like that.
And I
That's
think
a
it depends
lot.
a little bit on how much of the money Arizona is willing to eat, right?
Yes,
Like I think that
yes.
starts to come into the calculation. But if we're assuming the Vikings are having to take like a decent chunk of it, I think a 2 and change is like totally fine.
That's kind of where
Because
my mind went.
Because like look, the last couple of years went how they went. They were not some of his best ball, even though it had some pretty high highs. He's still relatively young. I still think that he can be like a top half of the league quarterback. And this Vikings situation is better than what he had in Arizona for a number of reasons. One, the offensive line will be better. I know we were kind of excited about what the Cardinals' weapons could be, and they're obviously pretty good, like Trey McBride, all that stuff. I think Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Hawkinson is a little bit better than what they've got. And then Kevin O'Connell, like, I know, he hasn't been able to make J.J. McCarthy maybe the prospect that we wanted him to, but with all other veteran quarterbacks, he has proven that he can get the best out of them. And I do think that there's a world where he can get Kyler to play like the 14th best quarterback in the league again. And if he's doing that with this defense, with Justin Jefferson as his number 1 receiver, like that's an 11-12 win team again.
I guess that's kind of my thought is that, okay, in the best case scenario here, you're giving up a 2 and change and the amount of money that you're paying him. So Kyler right now, just if you do a little bit of back of the napkin math, I think it'd be like a $29 million cap hit if you took the whole contract. He has a $23 million base salary plus the roster bonus that you can prorate over a couple years. $29 million cap hit for a quarterback isn't a ton, but it's not nothing. Like that's a real amount of money, especially for a cash-strapped team. If you can make him the 14th best quarterback in the league, what about trading a 5th-round pick for Mac Jones or a 4th-round pick for Mac Jones and paying him $2.8 million and he's the 20th best quarterback in the league?
Aren't you more intrigued by the higher ceiling at the end of the day?
But how much higher is the ceiling?
In like a 3-game run, like if you're just trying to get a little bit hot,
$10 million as much.
He's Mac Jones, man. Like Mac Jones is a perfectly capable quarterback in this league. He played some really good games this year. He is Mac Jones. Like he's not going to take this team all the way to the end. And I'm not sure Kyler is going to either. He has a lot of his own faults, but I at least have more faith that like if necessary, Kyler could take over a game or 2 with this supporting cast. Whereas like Mac Jones would need a lot to go right. And again, last year's Seahawks, or I guess this year, were proof that like that can be enough. And Sam Darnold's obviously more talented, had some high moments, but like that feels a little bit more like you're trying to thread a needle. And I guess you are.
I disagree with this. I'm just
still.
trying to kind of interrogate the idea. And my second question to you after the how much would you give up is, do you think Kyler Murray is an actual solution? And it seems like you think he might be an actual solution. And I think that plays into how much you're willing to give up for him. Because none of the rest of these guys are actual solutions. Maybe Malik Willis. Maybe. But none of the other guys available here
right?
are actual solutions. And so if you think Kyler is that, I think that you're willing to move a little bit more because other than Kyler, even in the draft, there are no actual solutions in this quarterback carousel if you're Minnesota.
Also, what is your realistic path to a solution? Like the Vikings, for a lot of this season,
This might be the best one.
They were abysmal, especially their quarterback play. They still finished with a winning record. The roster is really good. They have the best possible draft pick among non-playoff teams, and that was after after a season where watching them was a bummer for a lot of the season. Like they're too good to stumble into an easier pathway to a quarterback. So yeah, like I think I think I think my first choice would be Geno because it's the lowest risk and you're not tying yourself to somebody for the future. But if you're trying to answer this thing for multiple years, you're in a position where Kyler might be the best possible answer as far as guys with like real upside and not guys that are toward the end of their career.
The amount of money they're going to have to move around to make this work too is just like, I'm playing around with it right now. You're restructuring Justin Jefferson. You're restructuring Christian Darrisaw. You're cutting Javon Hargrave. Like, they're going to have to do some stuff in order to, like, the gymnastics necessary to fit Kyler in at this price. Those are real. So
missing on a top 10 quarterback is a very painful proposition. I don't recommend
how this
doing
goes.
it.
Every team has to dig themselves out of that. And so I think Kyler is probably the best solution for the reasons that you guys are saying. The fact that it actually might be a multi-year answer that gives you a real off-ramp from the mistake that you made. Part of me kind of wants to see the Geno thing as an experiment because I need it. Like, I need the Geno bounce back to happen.
You just can't let that be Geno's final note.
It would be so depressing if that was the last thing we saw from Geno Smith as a starting quarterback in the NFL. I was saying this in the Discord last week. I get the fact that people are going to use this season and what Sam Darnold did as proof that Geno was never good. And that's just sad because it's not true, but it's hard to argue against it. Like, I can understand people coming to that conclusion, even if I think it's misguided. It just bums me out.
What name did you give Alec? Or was it Geno or Kyler?
It was Geno or Mac Jones. Just because
okay.
I again, for whatever reason, I'm just in the, how do you solve this cheaply and just get competent quarterback play? But I think the argument, Dave, that what is a better path to like a multi-year answer than Kyler Murray this year? Because let's say you get a Mac Jones for a year and you can win 10 games with Mac Jones. Well, then what do? Then you're going to be in a position all over again where you're going to have to maneuver around the first round to go draft another one. And so your guys' argument that Kyler is actually the best real answer for this team in like a long-term way, I can see that. I don't disagree with that.
And like I said, I think the idea of Kyler is bigger than the reality. Like, let's say that trade goes through. Bleacher Report and ESPN are going to have the Photoshops ready to go. And like Justin Jefferson is going to tweet or say on Instagram, like, oh, who's stopping us now? And like, it's going to be this like viral moment. And everybody's going to be making fun of him because it's like, oh, don't let him sell Call of Duty in Minneapolis. It'll all go south. And meanwhile, you're giving up like a second-round pick and you can move on in 2 years because he's already into this contract. Like, it is not as big of a deal as the name power of Kyler Murray leads you to believe. And I think that's
right.
worth remembering.
I'll be curious. I mean, we still have landing spots. Like Geno, I think will go somewhere because I think there are enough teams that need a quarterback. And I think he'll be released by the Raiders. That just makes the most sense. And he'll be available at probably a decent price. And there's so many teams that need starters. Like, if you're the Jets, does he make sense for you as like a 1-year stopgap option? Like,
that would be insane given he started his career there.
Oh, yeah. I didn't really think about that.
I don't know if that's going to fly.
If you're the Cardinals and you need somebody to start for a year, like Geno, I think was one of those options.
Which I actually do like because we kind of talked about Geno before as like the Stafford light in some ways. And I do think like fitting him into the Mike LaFleur offense probably makes sense.
I'd watch it. I think that one makes sense. And then the team, the guy that I think is maybe the most intriguing just because I think he'll get paid a decent amount of money based on what we've seen from him. And I think a team will actually invest in him as a potential option. Where does Malik Willis go? Like, where does Malik Willis go and what is the price from Malik Willis? I think is going to be really interesting to watch. Is there a team you like for him, Derrik?
It's hard trying to make the money work, right? Like the Jets feel like they're in such a bad position that honestly, if I'm Malik Willis, I don't know if I want to go do that. Like, I honestly think another year of like,
you say that until the contract's on the table.
Maybe,
so
but
it's
like
$20 million a year.
Yeah, I don't know. The Jets freak me out. And then I do think the Dolphins is actually like intriguing if they can somehow make that work money-wise, but I really don't know how they would be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on what happens with Tua, right? Like they've said, I think I've seen it reported through back channels that they want to trade him. Of course they do, right? Like, and of course they want to trade him. Whether they'll be able to is a different conversation.
And so there's the thing, like with the Dolphins, is like in theory, it's like, okay, maybe we can trade Tua and we can get some other team to take on some part of the money. But if you're that X other team, Wouldn't you rather just give that money to Malik Willis than like trade it to go and pay Tua Tagovailoa? Like that doesn't make any sense.
He has a $39 million base salary this year too.
Good God,
$39 million. And again, the Dolphins would probably pay some of that, and there are ways to solve this, but what a quagmire that team has found itself in. Any other lingering quarterback questions that you guys want to hit? Any other players? Any other landing spots that you have been in front of mind for you that we did not talk about at all?
I mean, I guess we should bring up the Steelers, I guess, but
doesn't it just feel like Rodgers is going to go back there now?
That would be my guess.
Which, how sad, like, it just feels gross that like him and Mike McCarthy are kind of remarrying. It just feels weird.
Everything about this makes me feel like I'm taking crazy pills. The entire thought around the Mike McCarthy hire be like, well, now they can get Rodgers back. Who? Why? Why is that a good thing? Like, what? How are you selling this as a positive to me? And the other end of it is Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers hit a dead end as a pairing 8 years ago. Wasn't 2 years ago. It wasn't 5. It was 8 years ago.
They were both younger and sprier at the time.
Counterpoint. This is how bleak it is. Like what's the alternative? Like that feels like it could potentially be a landing spot for Mac Jones. Like if the Steelers don't want to do that, or if they were willing to trade some capital, maybe throw Brandon Ayuk in and call it a day. I don't know.
I would do anything else other than the Rodgers thing, because what Rodgers is going to make, he's going to command what? He's going to want at least like $10 million, right? In order to come back and play. It just, there's no argument. I'd rather have Mac Jones for 2. I just rather would. Like at this point, I would rather have that.
This is a case where I'd much rather have Mac Jones. Yes, 100%. Like this is one where like Aaron Rodgers is like the 25th best quarterback in the league at this point, and he's 40-something years old. Like, there's just, this doesn't get you anywhere. I'd rather do anything else. Even if it ends up worse, I'd rather do anything else.
The only dog I have in this fight is getting Geno back to a place where he can play confident football next year. It's the only thing that I'm rooting for at the end of this entire cycle.
I guess Geno could go to Pittsburgh. That's fair.
They should have done it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, you were curious about Maxx Crosby and what the future for Maxx Crosby might look like. Maxx Crosby falls into a bucket with several other guys in terms of big name players that might be on the move this offseason. I was looking at the Maxx Crosby money, $5 million in dead money in a pre-June 1st trade. And so the Raiders could easily do this. Like some of the other moves we're going to talk about are a little bit more complicated, a little bit more knotty. But if the Raiders wanted to move on from him and a team wanted to spend a couple first-round picks to make it happen, this would be a pretty clean move for all parties involved.
It really feels like it's going to come down to how good of a job Clint Kubiak can do selling Crosby on his vision for the Raiders. And having a pathway to the number 1 overall pick and drafting Fernando Mendoza maybe could go a long way towards selling Crosby that he wants to be here for this. But it really feels that easy to me. Like with the way they shut him down at the end of the season and how unhappy he clearly was about that, the amount of speculation that's already been in place. I mean, really for like 2 years at this point. But it feels like it's on Crosby to me to say, all right, no, I see the vision and I'm here for this. Or yeah, this is the time. It makes sense with the contract. It makes sense where he is in his career. He's still firmly in his prime, but it's getting to the point where how many more years can you count on that? And so this feels like nut cutting time where, I think we talked about it on the show that we did a couple days ago where like if the Raiders want to if they want to add some juice to this rebuild, having the picks that you would get in the Crosby trade makes perfect sense because Crosby's not going to be on quite the same timeline as like a rookie quarterback. So it makes a hell of a lot of sense if that's what they want to do. And maybe we can finally see if they do it instead of just speculating about it.
The timeline thing is an interesting discussion. And I remember talking to people in Cleveland when they were discussing trading Myles Garrett. And the thought was, if we trade Myles Garrett to a contending team, let's say it's the Bills. The Bills are going to be picking between 25 and 32 most years. So you get 2 first-round picks and change. So you get the 27th pick, the 28th pick, and maybe the 48th pick in another draft. That's a ton. You know, when you think about 2 1s and a 2, but then you actually think about the players and will you be drafting. And the other thought is is that going to be more valuable for us if we can turn this around in the next 2 to 3 years than just having Myles Garrett on the team? And so that was their thought process. And I think you could go either way on it. With Maxx Crosby, if you can get 2 firsts for Maxx Crosby, Derrik, aren't you compelled to do that? Like, isn't that enough of a price to kind of restock other areas of your team that actually would be the smart thing to do if you were the Raiders? Where Dave talking about trying to convince him to stay and everything else, I get that because it is like a PR hit if he leaves, and I think that there is some value quietly in making sure that he's a part of what you're building there. But I also think if you just look at it, Maxx Crosby is a really good player. Would you rather have 2 first-round picks and the money than Maxx Crosby? I think is actually a worthwhile discussion.
I think the reason I would say it's different than the Myles Garrett, I mean, one, Myles Garrett is a tier above even a player like Maxx Crosby because he's like the best pass rusher I've ever seen. But I think the other part of it is like, at least with Myles Garrett and the Browns, his side of the ball was awesome. And like, there was proof of concept that they could build like one of the best defenses in the league around a player like Myles Garrett. And obviously last year they weren't one of the best in the league, but they were pretty good again after like a weird 2024 season. Like, there is proof of concept. You can build this thing really strongly around him. The Raiders defense over the last handful of years has had like some nice moments, and Patrick Graham had called it really well, but like, they've struggled to really build this thing around him, and they probably need like 2 full off seasons to build what would be like a top 7, top 6 caliber defense around him. And again, by then, like, you probably would have rather had some of those resources so you can spend on the, like, around the quarterback that you're about to build. Like, this to me, Maxx Crosby's an incredible player. He might go on and like win a Super Bowl for somebody else. But this is probably a situation where if you're the Raiders, it probably does behoove you to kind of just let him go and get as much as you can back for him.
Who's the team that makes the most sense for Maxx Crosby? Like, who is the team that is in a place where they would trade away a ton for Maxx Crosby? Like, we can argue about the quality of the decision in the Packers trading for Micah Parsons last year. I think the Packers are the exact team that was in the position where you could justify and rationalize trading for Micah Parsons. Who is that team now?
You're not going to like the answer.
They're not, though.
Why?
They can't afford it.
Who were you going to say? The Cowboys?
You can say the Bears.
No, I was going to say the Bears.
Oh,
yeah. They're stretched
pretty.
They're stretched pretty thin from a salary cap perspective. If not the Bears, I mean, that's the funny thing. The funny thing about trying to project a guy like this to a contender is contenders are typically stretched thin on their finances because they're trying to hold an expensive team together long enough to get to the Super Bowl. I would guess a lot of people are going to say Buffalo. Does that make sense with Buffalo's finances and how they've been in the draft? I don't think so. I think this would make a lot of people laugh and like make fun of them for doing it, but Tampa Bay?
Honestly, I don't hate that because I do think a lot of their issues have stemmed from the fact that their front is just simply not good enough. And they've got a couple of decent players like Yaya Diaby, solid, Vita and all that stuff. But we talked all going into last offseason, like the thing that would really change the Tampa Bay defense is if Hassan Reddick is the player you wanted him to be. And he wasn't. And I think it's a lot easier to get there with Maxx Crosby that, like, yes, if we got him, he would be exactly the player that we want him to be. And like, I do think that would have like a pretty good trickle down effect. I'm trying to convince myself like how to get the Rams to do it. The problem then is like, I don't know how they fix the secondary if they do this, but I'm still trying to make this work in my brain.
Why do the Rams need another edge rusher? Why do you feel compelled to do that?
Who's coming off the field?
Here's the thing. They're going to have to pay Byron Young soon. And I do think that there's a case that trading for Maxx Crosby and then letting him go, like, you at least like recoup some of the money there in some sense. And I also think the idea of having Jared Verse and Maxx Crosby is like the best run defending edge duo that you could possibly get. And so, and honestly, after Young and Verse, it's like they've got a lot of nice role players, but it's not enough to prohibit me to get a player like Maxx Crosby. Again, the bigger issue to me is not like we have too many good pass rushers or too many good guys up front. The issue is if you potentially trade both your first round picks and some of your money, I don't know how they fix the secondary. That becomes the issue to me. And then you're kind of where you were this year, but I'm still trying to think my way through this.
I got one for you. New England.
I think New England is a reasonable one.
They still have plenty of cap space. They've got quarterback answered for a long time. They don't have to pay Maye anytime super soon. I mean, you'd still like to add cheap young draft picks to that roster. But if Maxx Crosby signs on, then I think you could lessen the sting of not having a couple first round picks. You already proved you can get to the Super Bowl with what's there.
I think
that would be
that's a
fun.
dangerous line of thinking.
Of course it is, but that is the push-pull of doing a trade like this. Is like it makes sense for a lot of reasons, but it can blow up in your face for a lot of reasons.
Other one that I would throw out, because I just think, all right, what's a team that you could reasonably make an argument that with a Maxx Crosby, they could like win the Super Bowl next year based on the rest of their construction. And I know they just drafted an edge rusher in the first round, but I'm not sure that precludes you from doing something like this. What if the Niners did it?
Listen, if they can make the money work.
I mean, they can. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. They're got a ton of big contracts on the books. 2027 is actually when they don't have a lot of cap space.
Right. But they're kind of screwed next year.
So if Nick Bosa has a $52 million cap at 2027. He ain't playing on that. So they'll restructure that in some way. And then the Ayuk money, he's at a $41 million cap hit in 2027. He's not going to be on the team. So literally just not having Ayuk's contract in the books and restructuring Bosa gives you $54 million in cap space. So in theory, that is something that they could do financially. And I know that they will probably, so if you look at it on that timeline, Trent Williams, his contract voids before the 2027 season. So you would need a left tackle. I mean, there's a chance they just try to find a left tackle in like the third round to just keep this thing rolling. So that's one where like, I understand you just spent a first on Michael Williams, but you bought Michael Williams into that rotation as like your third edge rusher. You got Maxx Crosby and Nick Bosa. You're cooking a little bit. That one's at least interesting to me.
See, I think you just said you think the Patriots line of thinking is dangerous. I think that's way more dangerous for the 49ers because look, I'm not saying their window is closed. They just got to the divisional round with a mash unit of a team, but like at some point you got to start thinking about the future and thinking about the fact that the best players on your team are all getting really old.
That's the correct mindset, by the way.
Which, I mean, it would be really fun, and like you double down for one more ride, and then all of a sudden it's September, and Christian McCaffrey's hurt, and Nick Bosa's dealing with something, and you don't have any draft picks, and the average age of your team is like 29. I just that sounds very scary to me.
Why aren't you any fun?
I think it's very fun. Look, I tried to have some fun with the Bears, and you just poo-pooed that immediately.
I'm not allowing that to happen. Exactly. It's fun to trade away 2 first-round picks for other teams.
For the other team in your conference that you're like, if they screw themselves, who cares?
Let's get to a couple of these other guys. The A.J. Brown trade is, to me, going to be a really fascinating one to watch. I don't understand how the money is going to work if they trade him before June 1st. Eagles writers that I was talking to at the Super Bowl seem to believe that it's something they could make work. Their accountants are much smarter and better at this than me over in that building. But if they trade him after June 1, it's only a $16 million dead cap hit. That seems more palatable. I don't know how bad things have gotten there. We're going to talk about the Eagles here in a second, but that's a name to watch. DJ Moore is somebody we've talked about. He has a $23 million base salary this year. The Bears save a ton of money if they trade him. I just don't think you can justify him on a $28 million cap hit based on what his role in the offense looks like and some of the other needs that you have. So I think that's something they should absolutely consider.
You trade DJ Moore, and free up space for like a Maxx Crosby.
You need to free up space for 2 starting safeties. There's so many other things they need to do with that money that you cannot give all of it to Maxx Crosby. The one I'm most interested in, because I think this is anybody could trade for him. I can understand why this team would have an appetite for dealing him, and I already have a couple landing spots in mind that excite me. I'm very curious what the Brian Thomas market looks like this offseason.
Okay, you've been beating this drum since like the trade deadline, basically, and I am well aware that year 2 was disappointing for Brian Thomas Jr. Don't you think he played better once Jacoby Myers showed up and sort of gave everybody a more defined role? And B, is it so late in this guy's rookie contract, and was it so bad that we're sure this needs to happen? That's my only pushback.
It's not a matter of that. I would want Brian Thomas on my team. I think it's a question of based on what you're asking him to do within the offense, specifically in Jacksonville, and the role that the other receivers are playing for you, he's kind of playing like a complementary role within the offense. It's like a vertical piece. If you could get, I don't know what I'd give up for him. I think that becomes a different
because you're
question.
not going to get a first is the thing.
And so that's probably the problem. But let's say you can get a 2 and change. Let's say you get a 2 this year and a 4 next year, and it adds up to like a late first-round pick. And you're Jacksonville, and really what he's giving you is like a field stretcher within your offense. I think you feel compelled to weigh that, because that's worth more than what he's actually providing to you. And for a team like Buffalo, he wouldn't just be that. He would be like the focal point of your passing game, which he's not going to be in Jacksonville based on the second half of the season, even if he was playing better.
But I think he does give you a lot, even if it's not showing up in the stats. Like, I think the way that the offense functions and where they're trying to throw the ball, having a player like him who stretches the field, like, is a necessity. Like, it actually reminds me a little bit.
Can you get
player,
that
obviously.
cheaper? That's my question.
I mean, maybe, but like, I think over the back half of the season, we saw proof of concept of what it can look like with him. And I think he will be better than he was this last year. Like, I think new offense, they were trying a lot of weird shit for the first 8 weeks of the season. He was clearly unhappy with his role. And I do think it started to settle in. So I think that he can be a pretty good player. But I was going to say, it reminds me a little bit of like the early Shanahan, Kirk Cousins, like Washington offenses. Deshaun Jackson didn't put up like huge numbers, but he was the most important player on the offense. And I don't necessarily think that Brian Thomas is the most important player on the offense, but I do think he serves a very functional and necessary role if we're trying to create space for Jacoby Myers over the middle, Brenton Strange over the middle, Parker Washington over the middle. Like, and especially too, it seems like Travis Hunter, the early rumblings are that he's not going to play as much receiver, which I think is correct. But I think that starts to play into your calculus a little bit of like, maybe we do need to just keep Brian Thomas Jr.
The only thing that gives me pause is the Jags don't have a first round pick, and you're not going to get one by trading Brian Thomas Jr. But if you want to try to add draft capital, although I'm looking at it and
they've got a lot of threes.
I was going to say, thanks to the Isaac Tisla trade, it's not like they're lacking for draft picks. I mean, they have their 2 and they have 3 threes. So this doesn't feel necessary to me. I think I'd rather take my chances that BTJ can get back on track.
You guys are probably right. I'm just trying to give the Bills a fun receiver because I want to watch it happen, but you guys are probably right. Let's move on to our next one here. Both of you guys wanted to talk about the Eagles a little bit. And the framing that you guys both had was very funny, where Dave was like, is the makeover going to continue? And Derrick's was, how bad does this get?
because so coming off of what would it have been, 2023, where things went awry, right? Like the Brian Johnson offense is not all that good. You know, some of this stuff falls apart. Run game isn't what you want it to be. Well, then the next offseason, they get Saquon Barkley. You still have Jeff Stoutland around. You hire Kellen Moore, who was not the sexiest play caller.
He clears the bar.
He cleared the bar, and we knew what he was, right? Like we had seen him call pretty good offenses in the past. You have pissed off Jeff Stoutland to the point that he doesn't want to be in the building. So that's the other thing. It's not just that he left or retired. It's that it seems like there was a lot of weird dynamics going on there. So you pissed off maybe the most important man in the building, which is not great. Then you hire Sean Mannion as offensive coordinator. And I think there's a chance that he ends up good, right? It's just we haven't seen him. He's only really been coaching for a couple of years in the league. And so we really have no idea if he clears that bar or not. And then I think the offensive line, even just from a talent perspective, is worse now than it was a year or two ago. Saquon Barkley is getting a little bit older, and he's obviously coming off a year where I think he was not 100% healthy. A.J. Brown, who knows, like if he's even going to be on the team or what his appetite for playing at a high level on this team is going to be. Like, this feels like it's all spinning out of control in a way that they kind of gathered themselves and we're okay going into 2024. Going into 2026, I don't feel so confident they're going to do that again.
I think I feel the same way as Derrik. Yeah, I just phrased it nicer. I was thinking of like...
Says a lot about our personalities.
That's why I wanted to shine a light on it, because I thought it was so telling.
Like, I bend over backward to be diplomatic, and Derrick's just like, no, this sucks, and I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. And I really admire that. But no, I was thinking about like if you're remodeling or doing work to your kitchen, like are we just changing out the tile on the backsplash and adding a pot filler and calling it a day? Or like once you take that tile off, do you realize that something's rotten in the walls and all of a sudden you're just ripping everything out? Like that's what I think about with the Eagles, where it's like, okay, are these some cosmetic changes that are going to get you where you want to go, or are we trading AJ Brown, or like is Lane Johnson going to retire and completely throw your plan for the offseason into upheaval in terms of what you need to do to your offense? So I'm just curious to see how much longer it goes. And I'll just say, I don't appreciate and I don't buy the gaslighting. Like when the Jeff Stoutland stuff came out, there were plenty of people that were like, well, Sean Mannion wants his own guy in there and the scheme changed and new faces are good. And I'm just like, absolutely not. You're not going to tell me this guy who has been so pivotal to the Eagles' success, who has been there through multiple head coaching changes, by the way, forget about a coordinator, but he's survived multiple head coaching changes, all of a sudden just leaves and drops a statement about it. And according to the reporting, did that before the Eagles were ready for him to. It's stinky. And is it stinky and you can just take something rotten out of the fridge and put some baking soda in there and it's all good? Or do we need a whole new refrigerator? Which I'm just using all the kitchen analogies right now.
Are you guys redoing your kitchen right now?
Not even. No, I couldn't afford to redo my kitchen if I wanted to. But yeah, I don't know how my brain gets these things. But are the Eagles done remodeling, or is it going to be a lot more?
Two things you guys did not mention. It sounds like Vic Fangio almost left. So
that too, right?
That goes beyond. We just run out of road with Jeff Stoutland. I think that speaks to the dynamics involved here.
Right. Everybody else in the building is like, I don't know if I want to be here. And that was part of the other thing about the 2024 turnaround, is that was when they hired Vic Fangio. And obviously he still is there. And so you're getting some sort of continuity there. But that was part of how they were able to like jumpstart this thing and kind of become like a new team. And the building felt different and all that stuff. It's like, well, now that part of the honeymoon phase is like not existent anymore.
And I'll say this. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Christian Parker, but I think he's a really good conduit between Vic Fangio and the players. And so you lose like an important member of your defensive staff. And two of the names you guys have not mentioned yet that are connected to Jeff Stoutland, I mean, there are rumblings that Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson might be done.
I mentioned Lane. I forgot to mention Landon. But yeah, like, I mean, exactly. Like, again, is this a minor retool? Or is a shitload of stuff about to change in Philadelphia? And both of those seem completely plausible.
This is, to me, from going to the Super Bowl in 2022 to the moment that we've arrived in right now. I mean, Dave, you're better at kind of pulling like historical context than I am with something like this. But in the 10 to 15 years I've covered the league, I can't remember anything like this, where it's so over and so back every single offseason. Like the idea that this team could win the Super Bowl. The Seahawks had their parade yesterday. A year ago, the Eagles were doing that. And now, 1 year later, the building is burning down. Like it's crazy. Like what this team does and the vacillations every single year. Like there's nothing to even compare it to.
You can't remember anything like this. And yeah, we've been covering the league for about the same amount of time. And that's the fun part about it too, is like the fact that both things seem so plausible is very funny. Like if you're an Eagles fan and you feel a little defensive about people piling on your team and you're just like, just wait, we'll show you. Like, I kind of believe you. I kind of believe the Eagles might be really good next year, but I also kind of believe it might be a dumpster fire. Both things feel equally possible. And so the next few months are going to be interesting.
All right, Derrik, what do you want to say about Drake Maye? What is your offseason question about Drake Maye? This one was so different than all the other ones. I was so excited to see it.
I mostly need everyone to not say insane things about Drake Maye on either side. Like I think we're going to get to a point where he had like the two most extremes that you could possibly have in a season, where you have the second year quarterback jump where he is like a couple of votes off from winning the MVP, takes a 4-win team, they win like 13 or 14 games, they go to the Super Bowl. But then in the playoffs, which is always the measuring stick that people use for these young and upcoming quarterbacks, he was awful. Like he played he had some moments, I think, against the Chargers, even despite some of the bad moments, but otherwise, and like 1 or 2 drives against the Texans, but otherwise did not play very well throughout the entire playoffs. And so I think there's going to be people that are going to see his playoff run and be like, the regular season was fake. It was all schedule. He's not actually that good. It was a flash in the pan. And all I'm going to say is, like, we just don't have to do that. Like, Lamar Jackson shit the bed his first playoff game that he played against the Titans. Like, a lot of other young quarterbacks have done this. Like, Joe Burrow did not play very
people
well.
talk wild shit about Lamar Jackson. Like,
yeah, and then he won 2 MVPs, though. But that's what I'm saying.
You're
it's
just
like
asking the NFL content machine to not churn.
Well,
I don't know what to tell you.
People are wrong about Lamar Jackson, and that's fine. I've been saying that for almost a decade now. But like, a lot of other young quarterbacks have played very poor games early in their. Like Andrew Luck had a 4 interception game against the Patriots. Like, a lot of very good quarterbacks have ended up going on and sustaining the play that suggested they could uphold in their second year. The first half that Patrick Mahomes played against the Patriots in his first playoff run, like, it just, these young quarterbacks are going to have these moments. And I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to have like a Patrick Mahomes arc where he's in the MVP race every single year. The last month of play should not erase how good he was as a 23-year-old quarterback in this league. And again, people are going to say the schedule, but like, it's really hard to be 23 years old and beat the shit out of everybody you play. And so that's all I'm saying is I am hoping that people do not use 1 month of play to forget everything else that he did.
I want to be clear. I want to live in that world, but I think you're yelling at clouds, basically. I just don't think the world works that way.
It's wishful thinking.
Yeah, the sooner you let go of that, the better. I still struggle to let go of it because I'm often the same way. I think for me, it's just a fundamental lack of understanding about so many people. Their first instinct when a quarterback has a bad game in the playoffs or when somebody stumbles late in the season is to like sharpen the knives and be like, I told you he wasn't as good as you said he was. And I think that it's important to add context to this stuff, and it's important to try to land on, okay, like, what is he really based on the schedule they played in the regular season, the schedule they played in the playoffs? Like, where do we land between those two things? Even though I think that's not all that important, because like Drake Maye is going to make $60 million a year when he gets his extension, and it doesn't really matter like where he falls between those two poles. But this thing of like, after a quarterback falls, everyone is ready to like just to sharpen the knives and go after this person. I just don't understand that. Like, I just don't understand that instinct, and it happens all the time. And I think I've just kind of learned to walk away from those discussions, or I'm trying to learn to walk away from those discussions. It's just like, you know what? You guys can have this conversation over here. I'm going to remove myself from it. We can talk about other things.
Well, and so that's like the last thing I want to say about it is like, okay, maybe this last month of play is proof that this season was a little bit of a mirage, and he's obviously not going to be in the MVP running every year. But like, to what end is that true? That he was only the 10th best quarterback in the league as a 23-year-old?
And even that, I think, is probably lower than it should be.
He was better than 10th this year.
100%.
I don't give a crap who he was playing.
Yeah, so whether Drake Maye is the 5th or 9th best quarterback in the league, it's like, I guess we can have an argument about this. Like, I think that the guy I would compare him to the most after this season, and it actually is kind of funny because I think this Drake Maye season and the fact that he almost won the MVP, the season that it makes me look back on and think, oh man, I wonder why we didn't talk about his season that way, was what Dak did in 2023. And it's kind of, to me, where the Drake Maye discussion right now is just kind of where the Dak discussion is. It's like, well, whether he's the 6th best quarterback in the league or like the 10th or 11th best quarterback in the league, you're going to pay him at the top of the market when it comes around. He's a guy that can win you all of the games eventually, like a guy that you're not going to pick a different quarterback to try to get you where you're going. And he's probably as good an option as anybody under the age of 25. And so why does it really matter where he falls in this discussion?
And he might still get better. Like, at least with Dak,
he's
like
23.
By that point he was, like Dak was like 30. Like, at that point, it's like, well, he probably is what he is. Drake Maye is 23 and will get better players around him. He will get better, all that stuff.
I really appreciate that we're 6 weeks into the new year and I already had to take age really poorly, because I said during Super Bowl week that Drake was going to benefit from plot armor, and that's just clearly not true based on the early returns. It's not.
Problem is, Joe Burrow would have needed to have 3 of the Titans games for his playoffs to be the same as these Drake Maye playoffs, and that's just not what happened. Speaking of Dak and the Dallas Cowboys, Dave, one of the questions that you had was, how are the Cowboys going to approach this offseason, and is this going to be different than what we've seen from them in years past?
I'm not ready to be hurt again, but I want to see if the Cowboys can get me there. And we've joked about it, that the hiring of Christian Parker sends a signal that this is a different coaching search and a different process than what we've gotten used to. I know for a fact the Cowboys kind of gave the reins to Brian Schottenheimer to fill out his defensive staff the way he wanted to. And that is a departure from the way the Cowboys typically do business. Now, can you keep it going? Because there are elements here for the Cowboys to be a really exciting team in 2026. You theoretically have the ability to keep George Pickens. The report already came out that they're going to tag George Pickens, which, like, of course they are. So you have that in place. They don't have cap space, but with all the big contracts they have on their team, they can free up plenty of it by sending a few emails. So money should not be an issue. And again, they should not be afraid to do that. Dak is a 32-year-old quarterback. Like, now is the time. Like, I really feel like you should only assume you've got like 2 more seasons of Dak playing at this level. Of course, he could do it for a lot longer, but in terms of planning for the future, 2 or 3 more years of prime Dak, this should be the time when chips get pushed in. You should not be afraid to leverage yourself. You should not be afraid to spend a little bit of money in free agency. You've got 2 first-round picks because of the Micah trade. You shouldn't be afraid to pay George Pickens, by the way, which, again, that's the type of stuff that I want to see. Are you going to spend in free agency? Are you going to do this stupid bullshit again where we're at training camp in August fighting over how much George Pickens is worth and having George Pickens like tweeting from wherever he does his offseason because he won't be in camp because the Cowboys won't pay him? Spare me all of that and show me that you want to push your chips in to a degree and take advantage of the fact that the Eagles weren't as good as you thought they would be. And there's a little bit of turmoil there and the Commanders are turning things over. It's all there for you. There's so many reasons why we could be really excited about the Cowboys, but it's going to take a concerted effort from their decision makers to be that team and live up to that promise. And I'm not ready to trust them to do it, but it could be an exciting couple of months if they decide to change their ways.
I'm not necessarily ready to trust them to do it, but again, the 2 first-round picks, and also the thing I would say, I feel like usually when teams are trying to retool a little bit, one, obviously you don't have to think about quarterback, but even for teams that have quarterback, usually the thing that you're trying to retool and fix is the offensive line. They don't have to think about their offensive line. Like, all those guys are locked in. Most of them are very young. It's not very expensive. Like, the fact that those 2 things are kind of already solved for you, I feel like that opens up your avenues to do whatever you want a little bit more.
They could cut Terence Steele if they wanted to, like if they felt like they weren't getting their bang for their buck. And that would open them up to draft a right tackle in the first round. Just complete the set. Just get a first-round pick everywhere and piss everybody off in the process.
I feel like we're kind of on the other side with Terence Steele, though. Like, the season that he had last year and the fact that he played pretty well last season compared to like what he looked like immediately coming off the injury. Like, if you cut Terence Steele and save like $8 or so million to do that, whatever the number is, that almost feels counterproductive. Like, I think you just kind of roll into the season with this group. Like, last year, I think I would have been more open to the idea of moving on from him than I am now, weirdly enough.
I don't think I would cut him, but I think people are going to look at his numbers, and if you're looking for ways to add cap space, I think people will bring that up. I don't think I would do it. I would just restructure Dak, restructure CD and Tyler Smith and Quinnen Williams, and like I said, just a handful of accounting maneuvers should give you all the space you need to work with. And I'm not asking for the Cowboys to break the bank in free agency. I don't think that is the right way for a team like this to spend their money, but you probably should come out of March with 5 or 6 guys that could play a meaningful role for you, which, like, for the Cowboys, that's a departure. They are the bottom barrel. They do not spend money. And so this is a March where I think you have to be willing to spend money, even if you're not splashing cash around.
The way I look at it is they're in a race to fix the defense while the offense is still in this space. That's it. They're in a race against time. And I think you can probably bet on the offense being what it is for at least one more year, hopefully 2 more years. Can you get the defense up to speed fast enough for you to be competitive in the NFC in the next 2 years? And I'll be curious what the moves are that allow them to free some of these resources up. If they restructure Dak and they cut Kenny Clark and Logan Wilson, Kenny Clark's number is massive. And they save all of the money to move on from him. It's not that Kenny Clark is a bad player. It's just that the financials of that are very clean. And I think you could survive more with Kenny Clark than you could without like a Terence Steele, for example. If they do those things, they would have $30 million in cap space, just with those 3 moves. The Pickens tag is the annoying part of this to me. Just extend him. Like if you're tagging him, it's $28 million against the cap. Like it's just going to hamstring you from doing other things. And so finding a way to extend him, and again, that, like Dave was saying, that would be a departure because by extending him, what you're most likely going to do is you're going to it's going to leave me a low number in the first couple of years. You're going to push money out. You throw some void things that they don't typically do. But I would like to see them do a few things they don't typically do in order to try to win this race against the offense with the defense. And I think that they're going to need to compromise on some of those traditional things if they're going to end up doing that.
They will obviously address this over the offseason. In fact, they will certainly have to. Are you aware of what edge rushers they have set to be on the roster for 2026?
It's probably Donovan Ezeraku and
Sam Williams is still in the last year of his deal, right?
Nope.
Wow.
He was drafted 4 years ago already. It is Donovan Ezeraku and James Houston, who was like their 5th or 6th guy, depending on how you want to say it.
Clowney will sign on April 28th or August 28th.
Clowney will resign in 3 months, but
Labor Day weekend, he'll be back.
For now, because Sam Williams is gone, Dante Fowler's deal is up, Peyton Turner, who was a backup for them, is also done. Like the entire edge room basically needs to be redone. It's kind of
like I said, they gotta before you even get to the draft, let's just assume they double dip with their 2 first-round picks on defense, which I think they probably would, barring an upset. You still need 4 or 5 useful defenders added before the draft even happens. Like you got to cover yourself in the secondary. You got to add some depth on the edge. The linebacker room is a mess. And so even if you're going to add 2 blue chip type of players in the draft, that is not enough. And yeah, I mean, I would love, even if you tag Pickens, I would love to have Pickens under contract by mid-March to help facilitate all of this. Am I optimistic that's going to happen? Not really.
The team-specific one that Derrik was focusing on is a team that we've compared to the Cowboys actually a decent amount over the last couple of years, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. And Derrik, your question, what is the Bengals pivot after what they tried to sell us last year?
I just want to know, how do they try to do this thing? Because obviously this is going to be an offense first team no matter what. Their 3 most expensive players are the quarterback and the 2.
I can tell you right now, by the way. I can tell you right now what the sales pitch is going to be.
That they're just going to be 5% better than they were last year, and the secondary will play better. And
it's even more compelling than that. We have $54 million in cap space. We're going to do the same thing to the defense that we did in 2021. We're going to bring in 3 or 4 free agents. We're going to microwave this thing. We're going to go from being this terrible unit to a more than passable one because we're going to spend this amount of money. And because we do that and the offense is going to be what the offense is, we're going to instantly be competitive again. I do not believe that, by the way. I want to be clear about that right now. I'm just saying that is what the company line easily could be.
And I get why it would be, because that's what I was going to say is they did that in 2020 and 2021. They spent all these mid-tier free agents and they kind of microwaved it. And then over the next 2 years after that, they started drafting all these guys, 1st and 2nd round picks, especially up front, a couple guys in the secondary. Most of them have not turned out. The secondary guys have been okay, but it's okay, the defense is really young. Now we kind of need to go back the other direction again and kind of get some veterans. But the issue to me is the reason that it worked the first time is it turns out Lou Anarumo was a really, really good defensive play caller and really got the most out of those guys. And it was a unit that was really fit to his vision and all that stuff. I am not confident that Al Golden is necessarily going to be that for them. And so even if they are better by microwaving it with some of these free agents, I don't know if they can hit the ceiling that they hit in 2021 and like over some of those runs. And so that's kind of where I get a little bit of like, I don't know how much that they can do this. They also, even outside of Trey Hendrickson, are losing a couple of other guys up front. Like I know Cam Sample, who has mostly been a run defender for them, but like he's going to leave, so they got to fill in depth there. Like their offensive line is also still going to need a lot of work.
Was really good for them last
there.
year too, and he's going to be a free agent.
That was the other one I was missing. Yes, like there's more retooling here, even for some of the like, younger pieces than I think that maybe people realize.
The parallels between the Bengals and Cowboys are getting pretty eerie, if we're being real. But like just like the way they operate, the fact that the owner is the general manager, they have Pro Bowl, all-pro quarterback play with 2 fantastic receivers, spent draft picks on the offensive line. The defense is absolutely freaking terrible. The head coach is a college quarterback. That's pretty interesting to me.
Hit a couple more of these very quickly. Dave, you're a very player-specific one. What happens with Nnamdi Madubuike this offseason?
I think it's worth bringing up for a couple of big reasons. Like, A, we don't know what's going on. And I don't want to make light of this. Like, Nnamdi Madubuike was shut down for the season with a neck injury. And you've heard whispers going all the way back to the season that this might be it for him. Like, he might have to retire because of this injury. I don't know that. I haven't heard that much about it. But clearly this was a serious injury, the way that he was shut down for the vast majority of the season. And then we get to the offseason, and again, like this is just stupid speculation, but like Nnamdi Madubuike during the lead up to the Super Bowl, he's tweeting things like good news, and he tweeted a photo of a passage from a book that said, "You either quit or keep going. They both hurt. Choose wisely." Just absolute what's the old Denny Carter tweet about like wide receivers say like the enemy speaks softly and carries a knife. Yeah. Just the peak off-season confusing vague posting by Nnamdi Madubuike. But it's very interesting to think the Ravens like lose an all-pro caliber player at the very beginning of the season. That's obviously a huge part of their defensive build and why the defense wasn't as good as what we had gotten used to. And it is just enormous to me to think what it might mean for Baltimore if he comes back and is available to Jesse Minter and what they're trying to build there. Hopefully that's true. And if he's not, then clearly it's a very serious injury. I'm not saying he should forego his long-term health. Please do whatever's right for you. But that is among the biggest potential additions that nobody's talking about, in my opinion, where like you just don't have one of your very best players for basically the entire 2025 season. And if he's available moving forward, it immediately changes the calculus of what I think the Ravens are capable of. Like if he's part of that front, then all of a sudden I'm like, yes, we can get this up to snuff in one offseason and the Ravens can be back where I thought they'd be.
It gives you a centerpiece of your pass rush immediately. I mean, like he can be that.
That was kind of the thing with like, their pass rush wasn't as good last year. And maybe some of that was, Zach Orr just wasn't calling it as good as Mike Macdonald was. And, they had lost some of the edge pieces that they had at the peak of Mike Macdonald and stuff like that. But yeah, it's that Nnamdi Madubuike had been your best pass rusher, even at like the peak of what the McDonald defenses had been in 2023. And so to lose him pretty much outright was just like, it's brutal. And also like that on top of the Ravens defense in general was kind of banged up for the first half of the season. And so obviously that on top of how good a player he had been and was missing, it's just like, it's a lot. If they get him back, that goes a very, very long way for this defense.
Last one here, Dave, you wanted to talk about the way some of the draft picks are allocated in the first round and the fact that we have 4 teams that control an outsized portion of the first round in this draft. And it'll be worth watching how they wield some of that power.
Yeah, I think it's just unusual to have this many teams with multiple first-round picks. The Rams have 2, the Jets have 2, the Cowboys have 2, and the Browns have 2. And that means, 4 teams could potentially be making a lot of picks, or conceivably could those teams use those picks to do something else? Like, are you trying to maneuver around the draft board? Are you using the extra capital to trade for a veteran player? Among that group, I think the Rams and the Cowboys are more interesting because they're closer to contending. I mean, the Rams are a contender now. So if you're LA and you got that close to a championship, obviously it sounds really fun to just add 2 first-round picks to your roster, or Les Snead being the original them picks guy. Like, he could try to send one of those picks somewhere for a player, or the Rams trying to balance the present with the future is also very interesting to me. Like, could you try to identify a quarterback? I wouldn't expect it to be the 13th overall pick, but picking down there at 29, I think that's realistic. So how they juggle that, again, how the Cowboys have a huge chance to completely rework their defense, assuming they do anything in free agency, if they hit on these 2 first-round picks. So just the fact that a small handful of teams have so much sway in the first round is something I've got a close eye on. And I don't know, my intuition says we're not going to get to the draft with all 4 of those teams having the exact picks that they do right now. I feel like something's going to happen.
I think that's probably right.
The only one I think is funny is the Jets. Given that they have the 2nd overall pick in a class that has 1 quarterback, I think it would be very easy, even with their other first round pick, to be like, well, just trade that, get as many assets as you can, all that stuff. But because they already kind of have so many others in next year's draft because of the Gardner
they have
trade,
3.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't really know if trading back any further actually helps you. And so they're kind of in a spot where it sucks to have the 2nd overall pick in this class. Obviously, you can still get a really good player, but like, this is a spot where you would want to trade down. But like, at a certain point, you need players, and just acquiring that amount of picks is like, you can't really field an entire roster of 22-year-olds. It's just, it doesn't really work that way.
Browns are the team that I think I think they should be in a place where they're maneuvering to find more draft capital for next year, because they don't have an additional first round pick in 2027. And so is there a player at 6 that people want where you can move down to the middle of the first round, add potentially a first in 2027, and then position yourself that way? Like, they're the team I think that needs to do it the most. The Rams, I'm so interested in, do they take some sort of dice roll on a quarterback this offseason? Is this the spring where they do it so they're not scrambling next year? Or do they feel like, man, if we use those first round picks on players, or we trade for a veteran, that allows us to like pry open this window maybe a little bit longer? I'm very, very curious how they eventually approach that.
I don't envy that decision, because you were so close, and it's so tempting to just push it all in. And if anybody would be willing to do it, it's the Rams. But would you be better off at least somewhat thinking about the future with some of these resources?
I almost think, because there's not another like great first round quarterback, in theory, it's like, it kind of makes the decision for them, right? And they could still take a guy in like the 2nd or 3rd round or whatever, but like, I almost think it like frees up their thinking with the first round picks of like, you know what, there's not a guy, we don't got to squint, take a tackle, take a corner, let's write off and try to do this next year.
I think you're right, but the way attitudes and thought processes change as these teams get involved in the draft cycle, like what we think on February 12th usually changes pretty dramatically by the time the draft is in sight. And so I do think you're right, but I'm going to be interested to see if there's a fly in the ointment.
All right. That is all we've got. This show, in my mind, kind of does like put a period at the end of the sentence for the season. I feel that way every single year. Next week, we will be starting kind of our off-season cadence. Dave and I will both be on vacation next week, and so things will look and sound a little bit different. We are recording a mailbag that will be running on Monday. The mailbags are back. athleticfootballshow@gmail.com. Just keep sending them in, because we're going to keep doing them. Also, we're prioritizing questions that we get in the Discord, and so this is the time, if you have not joined the Discord, please do. I mean, that thing is roaring with conversation all day, every day, even in the off season right now. We have got, I think, at least 2,500 people in there. And so again, we will be prioritizing some of the questions we get in there. So if you haven't joined, that's a really good reason to start. So the description, or the link to the Discord, is in the show description. If you guys are wondering how to do that, it's very easy. If I can figure it out, I promise that you guys can figure it out. We'll be having one more show next week, so we'll have 2 total coming your guys' way. We will be back for Combine Week we'll have 5 shows coming your guys' way Combine Week. And so after a small break, we are back in full force 2 weeks from now. Very much looking forward to that. For now, that is all we got. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.